I hope everyone can hear me now. Well, welcome again to the Cella Law Weekly Wednesday webinar. And in addition to the immigration updates that we'll talk about briefly, today we're going to focus on EB-5, EB-5 investment, as people are still trying to figure out what folks can do. Good morning from Los Angeles. Good morning, Los Angeles. What people can do, you know, as they're waiting these extended queues and some opportunities that may present themselves. And as I told you last week, we will have a guest today, Daniel Robinson, who I will introduce shortly, to help us see it from the perspective of the developer. And because he's so seasoned in this area and someone I respect tremendously, I thought his insight would be really helpful. But first, let's start with some of the updates. I know folks are just joining, and it's usually right before the Q&A, there's a big surge. Today, you know, we'll have the Q&A at the end. We would like, however, we're going to try to take the questions that relate to the EB-5 investment questions first, before we talk about all your other questions that you may have. And before we even get to the questions, I will say it again, I say it every week, I can't predict what will happen with the visa bulletin, but we can say that we don't think that, as we've been stating, that we're going to see a tremendous jump between now and October, when they're going to allow for filing dates versus final action dates for filing. So, updates. The Secretary, Mayor Koss, I think, yeah, Mayor Koss is using humanitarian parole to allow some at-risk Afghans without a visa to come in under humanitarian parole. The DHS is seeking comments on the public charge rule. If you remember, they replaced the former administration's rule, which barred pretty much from utilizing any type of service. Still wanting to make sure that, you know, they're not placing any, you know, barriers, unrealistic barriers for the ability to become permanent residents, which is very nice. Audio is still not clear. Oh, okay, let me try. Speakers are. There we go. You can hear me clearly now? Okay, good. Good. I think if I scooted up a little bit, and so I think that probably helped. The travel ban still continues. Remember, whether you are going for a Dropbox or whether you are trying to get an exception to the visa processing, you still have to meet the national interest exception, right? So they expanded the national interest exception, and if you need information on that, check out the link that Kara will post. But they expanded that to include new options like life-saving medical treatment for the principal applicant or accompanying family members, humanitarian travel to care for a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident or other non-immigrant status, and medical escorts or legal guardians that are needed to travel by air to accompany someone, or illegally required to travel for a foreign medical or law enforcement entity accompanying a U.S. citizen. The new update about the medical exam effective October 1st, 2021. So if you've already had your medical exam, this will not impact you. If you're going to have your medical exam before October, this won't impact you. These are only for the medical exams that are going to be taking place after October 1st, 2021, is that they will require a COVID-19 vaccine. So these are the updates not related to the EB-5. I'd like to welcome Daniel Robinson to join us. Let me see if I can get Daniel. I'll give him, let me see, attendees.
Hey, Lakshmi.
Hey, Daniel. Oh, there you are. Okay, good. I wanted to. You're pinned and ready with your video. Very good. So Daniel comes to us with, he's a co-owner and developer of the Durham Hotel, a really cute boutique hotel in downtown Durham that we were talking about. And he has been in, I won't say entrenched, he's been, he's well experienced, yes, with the EB-5 in investment vehicles, different types, if you will, for a number of years. I mean, he, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't like to read off your bio. I know you too well to read off your bio, but you know, you were involved with, you know, finance in the financial realm for a number of years, especially I think in the international markets, if I'm not mistaken. And so that kind of laid a great, I guess, framework for you to get, because one of the key things that's really important about putting any type of investment structure in place, you would think, is having some financial background on understanding how these things work. But
yeah, so yeah, yeah, I'll touch on that in a minute. Sorry, Lakshmi, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's, and so you've had what, I think it says 85 million of capital for projects around North Carolina.
Yeah.
And even though I guess either you or some of the core people on your team have done projects in other places, but this is just the investments that you all have done in North Carolina.
And in fact, those are, Lakshmi, those are only the EB-5 related investments.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the team that we've assembled for the Westin project has over $2 billion of development experience around the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast.
Fantastic. So why are we talking about EB-5 today? So everyone knows there's been a lot of news about the EB-5 program. So there are two different types of mechanisms. One is direct investment. That's when you directly invest into a project, and we'll get Daniel to talk about what his direct investment vehicle looks like. And then there's the EB-5 regional centers. Now remember, the EB-5, whether it's a direct investment or whether it's a regional center, the investment threshold had increased last November. And it increased through notice and comment through the agency, not through Congress, but through the agency. So on a parallel track, there are two things that occurred. Number one, that particular, the individual that was in place and who drafted the rules and for the increase, he was not, he did not have the authority to do so. There's certain rules and regulations, federal rules and regulations, as to who can, the succession rules. And so when the previous DHS person stepped down, prior to doing that, she readjusted the rules. And so someone came in that did not fit under the federal guidelines. So therefore, there was a lawsuit that said this person didn't have the authorization. And it's not just in the EB-5 realm. This has happened in a number of different areas within immigration. In fact, even the Office of Management and Budget said that the individual in place didn't have the authorization. So because a person didn't have the authorization to, craft the new rules, the rule itself is no longer valid. In fact, the judge stated that, it's the fruit from the poisonous tree. The tree was poisonous. He didn't have the authorization. So any rules that would come to place cannot be effective. Even though the current sitting DHS secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, ratified it, it still doesn't take away the fact that it was defective. So then the thresholds went back to their original levels of 500,000 and 1 million. Then in between, we have the EB-5 regional centers are part of what they call the pilot program. So they have to be reauthorized. Direct investment doesn't have to be reauthorized. Only the ones that are through a regional center. So that lapsed in sometime in June. And so there was a period of time between the decision, the district court decision that lowered the threshold back to 500,000 and 1 million, and the time of the EB-5 lapse. Now, it's called sunsetting, and the USCIS has been reauthorizing. Congress has been reauthorizing that for again and again and again, but right now there's so much going on. So we expect it will be reauthorized. The question is at what level? The other thing is that on a couple of days before the deadline, the DHS did appeal the federal district court decision. Now, it's appealed in California, which is typically, but I think this is one of those issues that's going to be non-party, because so many, agencies, courts, other people have ruled that the individual that created that law did not have the authorization. I don't know how they could overcome that. Another interesting point is in a footnote in the district court decision, they said that there was not going to be a stay if DHS wanted to stay, so that means a decision that would immediately, so that anything that's filed in the interim would not be eligible, they would have requested a stay, but they did not. So I think that that's interesting to note. And this is going to take some time. I mean, it's an appellate court decision, so you have that time frame where we are currently at 500,000 if you're in a targeted employment area. So that's the difference between the 500,000 and the 1 million is a targeted employment area. And remember, you have to create 10 jobs. So we're in a very unique position right now where you could possibly leverage the benefit of having this lower amount, which is currently the rule of law. So the USCIS hasn't changed their US policy memo on that, but there is some things in our jurisprudence, which is called, collateral estoppel, detrimental reliance, all these things that it is frowned upon to take a new law and retrofit it because people have relied on what the rules were at that time. So even if they were to change it, or Congress was to come in and change it and increase the threshold, there is a high likelihood that the people that file leveraging the lower amount now would not be affected. So EB-5 direct investments at the 500,000 level with the creation of 10 jobs. So what Daniel's going to tell us a little bit about his project. And I can tell you, one of the reasons why I have a tremendous amount of respect for Daniel is that during the COVID crisis, we had a lot of folks working with, friends that they knew or relatives, friends that were doing direct investments. And these folks really didn't have any investment experience. When we would receive an RFE or request for evidence as to what's happening with your project, what's going on, then there wasn't really much movement because of the pandemic. And that's where you get a sophisticated investor and someone who does it kind of as a hobby. That's where you see the difference. So you really want someone who has the experience to kind of navigate the various issues that may happen during a project cycle. So this is something that is if you're stuck in your backlog and you can't see the light of day, this may be something that you can utilize as a mechanism to get permanent residence. And, email us at info@cellolaw.com if you want additional information. We can kind of tell you what the parameters are. Money can come from the US, abroad, a ton of different countries. You can get it from your brother, your sister, your parents. It can be a gift. It can be a loan. There are many mechanisms. There was another rule, the Zhang decision, that said that loans don't have to be secure. So there are a lot of different moving parts, and we can help you facilitate that. But first, let's talk to Daniel and find out a little bit more about his project.
Sure. Thanks, Lakshmi. Appreciate the kind introduction, and thank you all who have joined us today for the time. As Lakshmi indicated, just a little bit on my background, I had started and sold a handful of companies coming out of college in a broad range of industries. And during the 2001 downturn, was looking for an excuse to hide from the world for a little while. Mm-hmm. So I went back to business school, came out and worked for Morgan Stanley for a handful of years. And so was able to leverage the entrepreneurial experience that I'd gained in forming my own companies and pair that with some of the work that we were doing at Morgan Stanley with high net worth individuals and family offices. And it was really during that period that I began to take notice of cross-border issues, currency transactions, immigrant investment opportunities around the world, and realize how they fit into the portfolios of some of our higher net worth clients around the globe. So ultimately that led me to the EB-5 space. As Lakshmi indicated, we formed a regional center in 2010, and we're focused primarily for a long time on the regional center side of the business. But we find ourselves in unique times. As Lakshmi indicated, the world of EB-5 today is in flux, full of uncertainty, and unequivocally, the only certain aspect of EB-5 at this point in time is the opportunity to make a direct EB-5 investment at the $500,000 reduced level, so long as you're investing in a targeted employment. As Lakshmi indicated, the regional center program is in flux right now, but the direct program is permanent, does not require reauthorization, and is simply subject to some of the policy changes that we've seen over time. For example, the November 2019 memo that was just overturned by the Barron case in California. So today, investors who are considering EB-5 as an immigration option to the U.S. Need to be focused on direct EB-5 investments. For those of you for whom direct may not make sense, I'd continue to encourage you to consider your options on the regional center side, but just recognize that we're going to be in a holding pattern until Congress makes a decision on what they're going to do with program renewal. We do all expect that program to be renewed, but in what format and under what changes, we're not sure.
And I would say that the other, I'm sorry to interrupt, I was going to say another, perhaps notwithstanding the inefficiencies within the USCIS, but typically only 10% of the I-520 or EB-5 investment has come from direct investment. And with the USCIS not processing the regional center applications or putting them on hold, this is perhaps a time where, if you do a direct investment, that it can get processed fairly quickly.
Absolutely. And as you know, Lakshmi, there are visa set-asides within the EB-5 program for direct and rural and TEA projects as well. And so there's sort of a double opportunity to take advantage of some of those historic gaps in visa utilization in the EB-5 category. So not only do you have an underutilization of the direct EB-5 program, but as you rightfully point out, you now have a situation where USCIS is no longer adjudicating 526 petitions during the shutdown period from regional centers. That theoretically should open the door to more adjudicators being available to focus on direct EB-5 opportunities. And as you said, the direct program has constituted less than 10% of all EB-5 visas historically. So it is an opportunity. The timing is right for those for whom it makes sense. So we're certainly excited about the opportunity.
So tell me about this Westin hotel.
Yeah, so we're building a 180-room Westin hotel in downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. For those of you who know North Carolina, you're likely familiar with Greensboro. For those of you who aren't familiar with North Carolina, Greensboro is the third largest city in the state. It's an academic hub with 8 colleges and universities. It's also home to a number of historic legacy industries in North Carolina, the furniture and textile industries. There's also a strong transportation and logistics hub in Greensboro. And as we've seen throughout some of the migration shifts during COVID, North Carolina has benefited from a population influx, and Greensboro has certainly benefited as well. So it's a community on the rise, and one that we're heavily invested in and are optimistic about the long-term future of. So our project, as I indicated, is a 180-room Westin hotel. For those who don't know the Westin brand, it is under the Marriott umbrella. It's one of their higher-end luxury products. We think it's a great fit for the Greensboro market for a number of reasons. One, we're located in the downtown core where there's a significant amount of business activity, both traditional corporate business travel, but also a lot of legal travel. Greensboro is home to, a county court, a state court, federal district court, federal bankruptcy court. So there's a significant amount of legal activity. And as you can imagine, that generates a lot of influx of attorneys like Lakshmi here, spending time in Greensboro. So we think it's well positioned.
Right? Because I remember when I would travel to North Carolina, every single, it seemed, organization would have their annual event in Greensboro, and I never could understand why, but
it's actually an optical illusion. So North Carolina, again, for those of you who don't know, it's a long state, east to west. And so we tend to divide the state into 3 areas, east, central, and west. And what happens is these state and regional organizations will rotate their conferences from west to middle to east, but they always stop in middle again on the way back. So Greensboro is right smack dab in the middle of the state. It's a large community with a strong hospitality and tourism sector, as well as conference and events. So that part of the state gets about twice as many conferences as, say, Asheville or Wilmington do. And we'll certainly stand to take full advantage of that. We've partnered with the city of Greensboro. We're under construction already, by the way. We're constructing a 700+ space parking garage that spans about a block and a half in downtown Greensboro. And on top of the southern end of the parking garage is where we'll build the hotel tower that will house the room stack. We're also renovating a historic 70,000 square foot building that's adjacent to the hotel component that will serve as the hotel lobby, meeting and event space, restaurant, and bar. So as I indicated, project's already well underway. In this flux of EB-5, we found ourselves in a truly unique position. We had raised some EB-5 capital around the project on the regional center side. But as regional centers have the flexibility to do when it came to job creation, we only allocated our indirect jobs as a result of construction spend to our regional center investors. Right. And that provided us with sorry, go ahead.
I just want to make a quick point here. So direct investment, one of the key differences between direct investment and EB-5 regional center investment is, and there's some variances to this, but just to give you a clear idea, regional centers, you have to submit an economist, a report from economists that talks about, that outlines the indirect jobs. That means these are not the employees that are going to be directly working at the hotel, but this is through construction, plumbing, electrical, things like that. Whereas direct employment is those who will be working for the job creating entity.
Exactly. And so that's the distinction that we've been able to sort of take advantage of in the context of this project. So for our regional center investors, we were focused exclusively on the indirect jobs. There was no allocation of the direct jobs within the hotel. And as a result, as this shift toward direct EB-5 opportunities arose, we were quickly able to pivot and identify those 140 to 150 direct jobs within the hotel entity that could be allocated to a select group of direct EB-5 investors.
And this is not just the 140 or 160 odd jobs. It's not just some number that you all pulled out for, I mean, there's a basis that you've come up with that, correct?
So there are actually 3 points of reference to arrive at that number. One is that econometric analysis that you mentioned earlier, Lakshmi, where on the regional center side, we brought in an independent third party to run a full-blown feasibility study and job creation analysis. And based on their industry research and comparing the project across the geography that we participate in, they were able to identify a staffing model that would yield 144 to 150, depending on the stage of stabilization employees. But for us, that's not enough to support the direct EB-5 basis that we would like to make in a submission along with you to USCIS. So we rely on 2 other resources to identify what the job creation metrics look like. The first of those is our franchise agreement with Westin and Marriott, where they outline what a typical staffing model for a hotel of our size would look like. That's a great resource. It's purely independent and third party. We can provide that to USCIS to help support the job creation claim. But more importantly to us, we wanted our independent third party operator, PM Hotel Group, who's one of the 20 largest hotel operators in the country, who we brought on board to run day-to-day operations for us. We use their staffing models, and they actually own and operate a 180-room Westin Hotel in Wilmington, Delaware, which is a market that has a lot of similarities to Greensboro. And so we were able to look at their staffing model from the Westin Wilmington in order to gain a higher level of comfort in the staffing projections that we have for the Westin Greensboro. So know that when I say 140 to 150 direct employees, that's actually conservative. The real estimates are closer to 160 to 165. But our intention is always, where possible, to try to give a jobs buffer to our investors of somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50%. So using that 145 to 150 employee number, we've decided to limit this pool of direct EB-5 investors to 8 to 10 investors. Again, that'll require 80 to 100 jobs. We have sufficient evidence to support up to 150, 160, so we feel very confident about the jobs buffer there. The other important distinction is that regional center investors tend to be aggregated in a standalone entity that's typically referred to as the new commercial enterprise, the NCE. And that NCE then makes an investment or places a loan inside what's called the job creating enterprise, the JCE. In the case of direct investments, the investor is required to place their investment directly in the job creating enterprise. So in that scenario, the JCE is also the NCE. And so in the case of this project, we've opened a tranche of equity class to our direct EB-5 partners, where they would become members of the LLC that owns and operates the hotel. We'll create an advisory board for them to participate in. I will head that board up and serve as the liaison between that group and the board of directors. That input will be provided periodically to the board of directors and taken into consideration as policy decisions are made. And then all of those members will also have the standard voting rights that would accrue to any investor in an LLC typically. We'll offer a 2.25% preferred return to this group of investors, along with profits participation on the back end. And that's an important point, because one of the distinctions between the regional center model and the direct model is that the direct model does require that your investment be in the form of equity. It does require that you have the opportunity to participate in the profits and losses of the business. That's to help address the at-risk requirement of the EB-5 program. And it also requires the investors to play a more active role than they might typically play through a regional center investment opportunity, hence the creation of the advisory board.
Mm-hmm. And this is, it's great that you're talking about because it's not only for a green card, but it seems like the return, the numbers you quoted are pretty good for any type of investment in this current market.
Yeah, I would say to be realistic, Lakshmi, the return expectations for a direct EB-5 investor typically fall somewhere between a regional center investor's expectations and a traditional market rate investor's expectations. And so with the average regional center, most investors are really only looking for returns in the 1% to 2% range. Their primary focus is on obtaining the green card. Sure. And not having to play a significant role in the day-to-day of the project. typical market rate investor today, interest rates are extraordinarily low. That has tampered to some extent equity investor expectations here in the U.S. We always like to target returns in the mid to high teens at a minimum to our market rate investors. I would say for this EB-5 direct pool of investors, the returns are going to likely fall somewhere in the middle there. So if we're able to hit our net operating income projections, I think the annualized IRR to our EB-5, direct EB-5 investor pool will be in the high single digit, low double digit range. But again, at a minimum, our priorities are preservation of principal, ensuring the investor's ability to secure their green card through the investment, and making sure that everything we do is within the confines of the EB-5 program and helping them achieve those goals.
No, that's a great segue into my next question, because for those of you who are not familiar with the EB-5 process, when you initially file your I-526, you are issued a conditional green card. It's just like a regular green card. But within 2 years of getting that green card, to remove the conditions, you have to prove that the jobs were created. Now, that's where everyone should be weary of folks that are new to the investment process, because so many things can happen. So why don't you tell us, with almost every industry, certainly the hospitality industry being impacted by the pandemic, how were you all able to offset that? Because that, to me, the ability that you've been able to do that, if I were an investor, would give me greater confidence to go with an organization like yours than another organization that perhaps is having a lot of challenges right now.
Yeah, and Laxmi, if you'll bear with me, I think I can address that question from sort of two perspectives. One, the perspective of an operating hotel like the Durham Hotel, which is, as you referenced, was an EB-5 project that we worked on and still own. But also in the context of the Westin Greensboro project, which construction had begun as the pandemic was really beginning to take its toll. So, from an operating hotel perspective, we've never seen anything like COVID. Revenues were down in non-leisure markets, so not your coastal or mountain towns where people were getting away to during COVID. Revenues were down 80, 90% in some places, and we weren't immune to that. Our top line revenue at the Durham was down close to 80% at the trough of COVID. But prudent financial planning, I think, has helped us prevent the catastrophe that could have been looming on the backside of COVID. We were able to accomplish success through this by minimizing the amount of debt on the project, so we didn't over leverage it. That's where you saw a lot of hotel properties getting into trouble. They just didn't have the cash flow to support their debt service. So that never became an issue for us. Two, we associate ourselves with industry experts, not just in the hospitality space, but in the legal community like yourself, tax and accounting communities. And as a result, as various programs that were designed to benefit those industries impacted by COVID were being unveiled by Congress, we were sort of in a premier position to be able to take advantage of and participate in those programs. And I won't lie, for organizations like ours, PPP money, which many of you on the call have heard of, it was a lifesaver for us. It provided sufficient cash flow to get us through the worst of times. It allowed us to maintain staffing levels, which our EB-5 investors needed. But more importantly, it kept our family members who, and we think of our workers at the Durham as family, it allowed us to keep them employed and coming to work every day. So from the perspective of an operating entity, that's how we were able to mitigate a lot of that risk. On the construction side, it was scary. Being under construction on a hotel during the worst economic cycle in the history of the hospitality industry is not a fun place to be. Traditional equity partners, your lending resources all begin to question whether or not commitment to the industry is something that they want to continue through the pandemic. And what I think we've been able to do there is provide evidence that the Greensboro market is a market that's desperately in need of the product that we're building. We're able to demonstrate deep and broad relationships in the community that aren't just surface relationships. They involve us investing significant sums, not just in the Westin project, but across the street in an opportunity that we're looking at. We were able to work with our general contractors and our suppliers to take advantage of supply chain issues where they may have had negative impacts. We were able to defer or delay orders because we didn't mind necessarily slowing construction down for a period of time. So it allowed us to slot in to places where we could enjoy some cost savings as some of our competitors and others in the industry were seeing cost escalations. But more importantly, I think it's just about commitment to a strategy and a vision for the project, and making sure that we had our ducks in a row pre-COVID. We're open and transparent with all of our partners, and continue to achieve open lines of communication to help mitigate and manage through.
Fantastic. And do you have any pictures of your?
I do. So I'm smirking for those of you on the line because Lakshmi and I talked earlier this morning, and I was so excited to bring up our webcam to show you live construction footage. Two factors have conspired against us, Lakshmi. One, we actually had a power shutdown at the building today. We're converting to our construction temporary power on site today. So there is no power running those webcams. Further complicated by the fact that this call happens to be on Zoom and our webcams run through Zoom. So I don't think I could pull up two Zoom meetings simultaneously. But if it's okay with you guys, Lakshmi, I need someone to enable screen sharing. I can show you some photos from today, just so you can get a sense for what the construction site looks like. And you'll have to forgive me because some of these.
Oh no.
I would kick me out of most rooms to.
I'm so sorry. I was trying to make you, I think Kara may have to do that. Kara, can you make,
I think this is working now. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So I'm just going to run through a photo roll here real quick because, obviously one of the first questions we're often asked by investors is whether or not the project is real. And for anyone who's interested, we do site tours and walks all of the time. If you happen to be in North Carolina and want to take a look, we're happy to do it. Also happy to FaceTime as I'm walking the site, whatever helps you get to a level of confidence. But as you can see, this is the footprint for that 1.5 block parking garage that I mentioned. Unfortunately, we're at that phase of construction where a lot of the work that has been done gets backfilled and buried underground, but we have foundation networks running the entirety of the site along with, columns. Here you get a little better sense. This is the portion of the parking garage over which the hotel tower will be built. So the garage will go up 5 levels, and then the hotel tower will be built on top of that. You've heard me reference on a couple of occasions our investments in Greensboro outside of this project. So we have a master plan that we've been working toward for this 10-acre site across the street. So we are truly committed to the Greensboro market, and playing an active role there. Again, just some examples of the construction as it's underway. You can see how deep some of these foundations go. So as you're looking across other areas of the site, these areas were excavated as deep and have foundation systems poured that deeply. They've just been backfilled as we've continued to go vertical with the column runs. And so I won't bore you with a ton of pictures, but just a nutshell it. The parking garage component of construction is expected to run another 12 to 14 months. During the last 2 to 3 months of that construction period, we'll also begin going vertical on the hotel portion of the tower.
Wow.
The hotel construction is expected to run about an additional 12 to 14 months. And so at this point, the anticipation is to be open Q4 of 23 at the latest, with the garage open and operational well in advance of that.
Perfect. And then I know I didn't ask you this before, but it's just because it's one of my favorite hotels. Do you have a picture of the Durham by any chance?
I do. I'm going to go to a folder while we're talking, Lakshmi, and then I'll share the screen again.
Okay. And so the timing, is perfect because remember the job creation, a lot of people think it has, I'll say it again, it's 2 years after you obtain your conditional permanent residence. So the hotel should be up and running way before then. And so there'd be no problems in showing evidence of the job creation at that time.
Well, and one of the other things, actually, I don't like to mention this because I don't want our investors to lean too heavily on it, but with the direct program, you do also have the opportunity to include any construction-related jobs that are direct employees of the entity. And we do have a number of on-site direct employees of the LLC, our on-site site managers and project managers, those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, the job creation process for our direct EB-5 investors has already begun. And I would also encourage everyone to keep in mind, look, construction delays are an inevitable part of the industry that we're in, particularly in a time like this. USCIS requires that the jobs be created or there be a reasonable likelihood of them being created.
Right.
And so as long as the project is progressing forward in some reasonable semblance of the timeline that's projected, USCIS has never demonstrated an issue with job creation projections. We don't anticipate any further delays. We think we've absorbed the majority of those that we'll see. But just on the off chance that there are, all hope is by no means lost. There's ample opportunity to provide the evidence that reasonable likelihood exists and the project continues to move forward.
And when Daniel talks about reasonable likelihood of, the evidence that you need, things like, how far had they gone along? Is it progressing? What stage is it in? All of that helps to show that, the jobs are coming.
Right. So this is the exterior of our hotel in Durham, and I'll get to some more detailed pictures, but this is a 53-room luxury boutique hotel with a rooftop bar and penthouse.
Award-winning.
Award-winning. We were named one of the 5 best boutique hotel designs in the world the year we opened.
Wow.
And so we've been featured in 265, I think, publications now across the globe. And those are unique mentions where the focus of the piece was on us. There's another 1,000 or more where we've been part of a broader dynamic. On the interior, just to give you an idea of the style of hotel. So, this is a mid-century modern bank building that, sorry, our photographer got really creative. But it's a beautiful building. And again, sometimes sheer dumb luck works to your benefit in projects. You'd like to claim it was intentional. We've ended up with the Durham property with a hotel that was perfectly designed for COVID times. We have a massive dining room with double height ceilings. It has an open air outdoor patio, which is what you see just through the window here off to the side. We have a 5,000 square foot rooftop bar that has open air space, covered space, and indoor space. And so we're allowed to accommodate a lot of the COVID requirements that you see implemented across the hospitality industry in a way that actually doesn't disrupt our business very much. And so it's been a tremendous experience owning this property. It's been exciting to be part of the development of it, and we're equally excited about continuing that with the Westin in Greensboro. And just because I know Lakshmi likes spending time up there, I do just want to make sure that I get some photos of the rooftop in.
It is. It's beautiful.
But this is our,
I was going to say, and it really was a bank. So the bank vault is still.
It is. We have a bar downstairs in the restaurant where the vault is a critical design feature. But we joke that the only thing not custom in this entire property are the doors on the penthouse. we were oddly enough able to order doors off the rack for the penthouse, but literally all of the furniture, all of the design aesthetic, all of the iron and steel work, custom for the project.
Right, because it was such a unique structure to begin with, and you're kind of trying to make it work within, a hotel setting.
And Lakshmi, I know that you and your guests have a finite amount of time. I took a little longer than I intended to. I appreciate the opportunity, as always, to speak with you and your clients. I'll shut up and take any EB-5 related questions if there are any now.
Sure.
Otherwise, I'll let you get to.
I think
the
our
client questions.
moderator may be listening or be joining soon. And Shaker, you
Hey, there's Shaker.
take it off.
Hey, how are you all?
Good. How about you?
Good, good.
I'm good. Here is my.
As long as you don't try to throw it at him.
I'm
Yeah.
ready.
Pretty disappointing, the test that started today.
Yeah, I saw that.
Such a crashing first hour. Anyway, we'll forget about that. We'll cherish the last test memories for now.
That's right.
So Shaker,
All
I
right.
said that we would take, let's try to get the EB-5 questions in
Yeah.
first.
Trying to get
I asked
to-
everyone to put it in the Q&A, but I see that it may be, some people may have put it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm checking if about any EB-5.
And Lakshmi, while Shaker's looking at that, I happen to see some of the questions that were running through. There didn't appear to be very many related to EB-5. Just one other point that I want to make that I know you do a great job of emphasizing to your clients, and you referenced earlier, conversion opportunities, either from existing lawful residence visa in the U.S. currently. We have a number of investors historically who have migrated over from F visas to EB-5 related visas. And other visa types. And then also for those that have been stuck in retrogression purgatory, whether it's EB-2, EB-3, or what have you. We've also had a number of investors who have taken advantage of the openness of EB-5 to file concurrently a new EB-5 petition in conjunction with their EB-2 or EB-3 so that they have the opportunity to take advantage of whichever opens first.
Right, and one of the things that I highlighted, I think in one of our seminars previously, when we were talking about CSPA, Child Protection Act, if you have a child that may be aging out soon, what happens is during the time the I-526 is pending, their age freezes. And so you would be able to leverage that, for obtaining adjustment of status, because it freezes, and then once it's approved, you have 1 year to either initiate your adjustment of status or to apply for consular processing, initiate the consular processing. So this is a really good mechanism to use if you've already exhausted everything else, you've got an age out, and you just don't know when your date's going to be current.
All right, some good questions, Daniel. I think let's get the first one from RJ. So what's the timeline for EB-5 process if we start now? Timeline to get conditional green card and then permanent green card.
Well, go ahead, I'll let you speak. And I was going to say, I looked at some data today where they started, there's some 2019 applications that are getting processed. That may not be an indication of their efficiency or more of their inefficiency. So we do expect, because like I said, only 10%, if that, of the EB-5 applications were direct investments. The majority was the regional center. So that's on hold now. And I think between the expiration, the decision that reduced the fee and the EB-5 sunsetting, there were 405 applications that were
Just in a
submitted
week.
during that time.
Yeah, in just a week.
Which is all going to be on hold right now. So one would think that the process would go quicker. But the great thing is once you get once the I-526 is approved, you can go ahead and file for your adjustment of status. File for your, conditional permanent resident, the adjustment status for the conditional permanent resident. Then you have to wait 2 more years, and then you file for the removal of conditions.
And we always like to point out, I know you do too, Lakshmi, the word conditional can frighten a lot of prospective investors. The thing to keep in mind, your conditional green card conveys all of the same rights and privileges that your permanent green card does. It's just conditioned on you coming back in a couple of years and evidencing that you maintained your investment and that the jobs actually got created.
Right.
And once you're able to demonstrate that, the conversion process from conditional to permanent can be handled by Lakshmi on your behalf very easily.
And because it's not related to your employment, you can work anywhere, you can, that's what's wonderful. For CSPA age purposes, as long as the conditional permanent residence is issued during that statutory period, that's fine. It freezes the age. So you don't have to get the permanent resident, but the conditional permanent resident for purposes of CSPA, preserves the age of the child. So all the benefits that you would get from permanent residence, you would get from this conditional permanent residence.
And specifically, Shaker, in regard to the question of timing, it's impossible to guesstimate what that is right now. USCIS has an arcane requirement that they actually have to incorporate the delay times for all of these regional center 526s that they're not even touching right now into their calculations for how long it's taking them to review 526 petitions. So no matter how quickly they process these direct EB-5 petitions, you're not going to see the numbers shift markedly in what CIS is reporting. What we've historically always encouraged our investors to think about was just a 2-2-2 rule. Just assume that it's going to take you 2 years from the time that you make the decision to invest to get your application filed, adjudicated, approved, and get to your conditional green card. We often see it happen faster, but just for planning purposes, we encourage you to think about that. Then you've got the 2-year waiting period that Lakshmi evidenced, and then you're going to file your 829 to remove conditions. And again, because your conditional green card gets extended during that review period, we just encourage you to assume that that's going to be at least a 2-year period as well. And so we encourage you to think about this as a 6-year process from tip to tail, even in the best of times, recognizing that there are delays on the government side that are outside of our control, but you're not going to find a team that fights more for their clients than Lakshmi and her colleagues. So know that anytime there's an opportunity to help step in and advance a case, we've had great success with her and her folks doing what they needed to do to get USCIS to move.
Well, follow-up question from RJ. He says, also, at what point in the process do we need to deposit the funds into the project?
So the funds are required to be committed and deployed, and there are some slight exceptions to this, but for general purposes, you need to invest the money in the project prior to filing your I-526. Now, there's some question as to what the project does with those funds immediately after you make the investment. I'm sure many folks on the phone have heard reference to escrow accounts. We actually hate those because we think they run counter to USCIS's intent with the program and open you up to some significant issues on the RFE side down the road, particularly if there's a policy change in the way USCIS reviews things. But in the case of this direct EB-5 opportunity, which again is unique in the result of a very specific set of circumstances, we're going to work with our investors to bring the investment into the project, get their 526s filed, and then we'll just sort of hang on to that cash without deploying it to the project for a period of time in which we get comfortable that you're going to see the continuation of the $500,000 policy in its application to your filing. And we'll work with Lakshmi on that, gathering that feedback, getting to that comfort level, communicating with you as an investor.
And if you've got any
All right.
any additional questions, just email us. I mean, anybody who wants greater details, email us at info@cellulog.com and just cite that you're interested in learning more about the EB-5 option.
I got another one is from an anonymous attendee. He says, hello, where can one look up the list of preconditions to apply for EB-5 when one is on H-1B with I-140 approved?
What do you mean by preconditions? You can have many roads lead to Rome. So an H-1B is a, it's a dual intent. And so the way it would be structured is, even though there is an advisory board and you have to show some active role, it can be outlined that would take place once your conditional permanent residence is issued and you've got the authorization, or i.e. you've got the authorization to work.
RJ, you send an email, if you more further details, we will be glad to, respond on, if we did not answer your question completely, thoroughly. This next question from the AA is following up, and a couple of questions, Daniel, I'll just, I'll read all of them. What's the minimum investment required to be in the program? Is there any minimum return on investment and safety aspects to ensure that our principal amount is saved? Do we get our principal amount back after a few years, or it does not happen like that?
Great questions. So the minimum investment amount is set by USCIS. Currently, for this specific project, under a direct EB-5 investment, it would be $500,000. That would be the amount required to qualify to participate in the direct EB-5 program. In the context of safety and preservation of capital and returns, as I mentioned earlier, for this project, we do offer a 2.25% preferred return annually, as well as a percentage profits participation once we reach an exit event, either a refinance of the hotel or an outright sale of the hotel. In terms of preservation of capital, this is where I think investors have to be extraordinarily careful. And Lakshmi can certainly talk in more detail to this than I can. But the program requires that your invested capital be fully at risk at all times in order to qualify for participation in EB-5. And in the context of direct EB-5 investment, what that means is that you need to place an equity investment in a job-creating business. As we all know, equity investments come with inherent risk. There are no guarantees. The business could suffer a loss. We could go through another COVID crisis or similar crisis after opening of the hotel, which would impact financial performance. But what we've done internally to the project are take a number of steps to help alleviate and at least mitigate some of those concerns for our investors. First and foremost, other than the debt that we take on, our EB-5 investors are always first in line in our projects. That means we place your equity ahead of our own. We provide your annual returns and any profits distributions to you before we, meaning me and my development partners, are eligible for any returns or profits participation. And when it comes to preserving your capital, if we sell or refinance the hotel, our operating agreements require us legally to return your capital to you in full before we're able to recoup any of our investment. So in this project, my partners and I are investing a minimum of $10.1 million. We currently have 13 million of EB-5 and would be willing to accept another 4 to 5 million through the direct program. Every penny of that EB-5 capital would have to be returned to our EB-5 investors before we would be eligible to receive the first penny of our project. And so when investors come to me asking for a guarantee, I tell them I can't provide you one. Legally, I'm not allowed to. It would violate your immigration status. But I don't know what more I can do than put every penny of my money in line behind yours.
Right. So just to recap, the regulations require that the money be put at risk. And so when you have someone telling you, there's no risk involved, or we will give you X in lieu of your, those are things that would actually be detrimental for you to be able to get the I-520, I-529, I-526. I don't know what's happening to me.
26.
Yeah, 26 approved.
829 and 26.
Yeah, so approved. So it has to. So risk is defined by the regulations. But what is the actual risk? There's a regulatory risk, and what is the actual risk? That's what I tell everyone to do their due diligence and look at the history behind, how long, this whatever group you're looking to invest in, how long they've been doing this, what kind of safeguards they have in place. So clearly, when Daniel can't take a penny out until he gives you all your money, and you can't receive all your money until your conditions have been removed. So we're looking at that 6-year period. That's a minimum. That's not what Daniel says. That's what the USCIS says. So it has to be at risk according to the USCIS. It has to be, the investment has to remain in the project until your conditions are removed. That's by the USCIS. The other part as to if there is a return, are you How much of a risk is it? Is something that you would have to look into. I always tell people, and it's not because Daniel's sitting there, but there's some projects people will bring to me that is totally EB-5 money. And I said, if the developer does not have skin in the game, that would worry me. You want someone who is at risk to lose a substantial amount of money if the project doesn't go well. So I think those are things that can help you. It doesn't eliminate the risk factor, but it kind of mitigates the concerns that you should have.
Absolutely. And just the last part of that question, Shaker, I'm sorry, was about the timing of the return. As Lakshmi said, there's some legal requirements on when it can and can't be returned to maintain your immigration status. We encourage folks within the context of this specific project. Our plan would be to attempt to return capital to our investors through a capital event, either a refinance or sale, at the end of the 5th year of hotel operations. So about 7 years from now. If we can exit sooner, we all want to do that. I would love to get my money back in advance of that 5-year mark, as I'm sure you would as well. But just for planning purposes, that's what we encourage folks to think about. End of 5th year of operations so that we can ramp the hotel up to stabilization.
Yeah, the same individual wants to know, is there a slide deck that we can share about the project?
There certainly is, Shaker. If they want to, I know they have access to you guys' emails, and I can make available to you and Lakshmi that slide deck. Feel free to share it with them, or Lakshmi, if you want to share my contact information with anyone, I'm happy to provide it directly as well. But yes, we do have a presentation. Yeah,
we'll be glad to share. But I just want to tell the viewers, in simple terms, how long you should keep the money till you get your green card in your hand, your original green card. Once the green card is in your hand, then you can go to Daniel and say, hey, thank you very much. Here's my green card. Give me my money, or discuss with him options of what to do with your money. You
can certainly come to me and say you want your money. Keep in mind, this is an investment. We have parameters within the investment profile that we have to meet. And it's not just, and this is an important point. Remember, projects like this one are able to succeed because of the combined efforts of all of us. It's not just me and my development team. It's not just the investment that we make. It's the investment, time, effort, and energy that you and your family spend as well. And so we can't look at this myopically in terms of how it impacts us only. We need to look at how it impacts the family that we're building around the project. Right. And so in order for us to be good stewards of your resources, we have to take a global perspective. We need to look at what's best for everyone involved and engaged in the project. We're not going to arbitrarily withhold money. Right. We're going to return it as soon as we can.
Right. And that's what I'm talking about, being fiscally, having someone who's fiscally responsible. This should actually bode well with you, because you know that he is looking at making sure that no decision is made without looking at all aspects of the financial stability of the entire project. And while your money is invested, it's not just sitting there. You're getting a little return on that investment. So it's not like it's a dead investment. There is some return to be had when it can be had.
Yeah, I want to tell the viewers, Daniel has got, this is his 4th EB-5 project. I think he was on this webinar last year also once during COVID time, but, so this is his 4th one. He successfully turned around 3. In the first one, I think a couple of people have already got the money back. And so, Daniel, you have any stats you want to share just quickly, just off the top of your head? I know I didn't ask you to prepare for it, but just so that the viewers, because one of the questions was like, any recent example of how long it took for someone to go through this process. I thought, your stats would tell them, hey, you're doing a great job, in turning.
Yes. So across our 4 EB-5 projects, Shaker, and keep in mind, most of these were regional center investors, but we've had 117 investors come through our doors. Of those 117, 110 have been approved. We have 7 on this project that are still awaiting their I-526 approval. Of those 110 approvals, I believe at last count, 89 of them had also received their green cards or their conditional green cards. Within our first project, we've already seen the return of capital to investors after approval of their I-829s. Interestingly, our quickest investor turnaround, I know that was a question about the timing of this, and keep in mind, every case is unique, so do not anchor to these numbers or timeframes. But we had a client that we worked with through Shaker and Lakshmi, who was able to get their 526 approval in about a year. They were able to convert their status via an I-485 conversion to obtain their conditional green card within 3 months of receiving their 526 approval. And they've already filed for their I-829.
Yeah, they were on an H-1B, just so you all know. They were on an H-1B.
So,
both of them.
I was going to say something about there's something called the adjudicators. Well, it's now the USCIS policy manual, and it's the manual adjudicators have to follow when they're reviewing applications. One of the interesting things is, yes, this is a direct investment opportunity, but because they've already been designated as a regional center, the USCS is not supposed to review de novo the viability of the project, which is, it puts their regional center as an advantage versus, hey, I'm John Smith and I'm going to build a hotel. And I'm asking you for your investment and I'll file an EB. If you're not a regional center, you don't get that that benefit of that, because they've had to go through a very rigorous process to get that designation. And so purportedly, according to the USCIS policy manual, they're not supposed to review information about the project again, so that at least going in, it's already been reviewed, it's been vetted, and it's got a good standing, especially with all the approvals that they've already had.
And I just to build on that, Lakshmi, I would say that irrespective of what the adjudicators manual says, the first direct EB-5 associated with the project will likely get a little bit of scrutiny. But to Lakshmi's point, this is a project that's been vetted and approved. It's one that the adjudication pool is familiar with. And so what we'll have the ability to do, and Lakshmi and I have discussed this briefly, we can point to the regional center aspect to remind the adjudicator pool that they have seen this project and are familiar with. It's a legitimate business plan that meets the matter of Izumi, requirements for EB-5 program, or sorry, matter of HO. It's verified. The jobs are real. The budget's real. The timelines are real. And so as a result of that, I think we'll enjoy a likely advantage over some other pooled direct EB-5 opportunities.
Great. I think that's all the questions we have on EB-5, unless either of you have anything to add to what you already talked about or clarify anything.
I was just going to say, remember, we've got a window. Congress is going to be back in session, so they may reauthorize. They may increase the threshold. It's going to take some time for this appeal process to go, but we're talking about, there is this window of opportunity will close. The window will close. So
last week before they filed the appeal, Lakshmi, I think last week before USCIS filed the appeal, we probably would have said it's a window measured in months. I think we're looking at a window measured in weeks now, depending on what CIS does. That's not to say it's 1 to 2 weeks. I think it's probably 6 to 8, maybe a few more weeks. But time is of the essence if you want to take advantage of this reduced investment threshold at this point in time.
I just want to add that before the program, the regional center program was to expire in June 30th, we filed, in 5 days. Lakshmi Chawla and
don't ask
legal.
me to file it in 5 days again.
Yeah.
I would really like more time, but
I'm just saying, because if probably the viewers out there probably need some time to get some money from one place to the other and things like that. And of course, we can always talk to you, if that's the case. But as Daniel and Lakshmi says, you want to do it, just do it. Just come to us. We'll tell you how to do it. That's
Look, last thing I want to say, Shaker, as much as I will be thrilled to have conversations with each and every one of you, and I want to welcome you to reach out and contact me, like I said, Shaker and Lakshmi, share my contact info liberally. The first conversation you need to have is with Lakshmi and her team.
Yeah.
We always tell folks, you need to make sure that EB-5 is the right decision for you and your family. It's not the right fit for everyone. It's absolutely not, and we would never represent that it is. One of the reasons that I love working with Lakshmi, and I hope one of the reasons she loves working with me, is that neither of us predetermine that an immigration route is the right route for everyone. Your situation is unique. Your family situation is unique. You have to pick the right path for you. I love Lakshmi and her team because I've never known them to guide anyone or steer them in the wrong direction. If I get to be involved in that process, I'm grateful and thankful for the opportunity. But if that path takes you somewhere other than EB-5, I'm always here if you need anything, and anything I can do to help, I will.
Yeah, I wanted to say that this is to have the person who is actively involved without having an agent, or this is a rare opportunity. Most of the time, you'll never talk to the developer. You will talk to their agents and people and the layers that are not familiar. We've gone to folks' house, he's gone to tons of dinners, tons of, from India to China, all over the place. So he meets with the people personally, and they not only call me when they have an issue, but they call him when they have an issue. And then Daniel also calls me to let me know that they've called him. So you've got a really great spokesperson. I don't know of anyone who is a non-lawyer that is that familiar with the changes in the rules and regulations and how it's going to impact as investors, as Daniel does.
Yeah, he's very active on WhatsApp, and all for the folks from India and all of the other time zones. You'll get a response. You'll be surprised.
Got to keep odd hours to watch global cricket.
Hey, here's the one interesting question. Are we going to have any ownership of the business after we invest? I'm sure you must have addressed that, but
Yeah. So, corporate structures in the U.S. can be a little wonky for folks coming in from other markets. The most common business entity type in the U.S. is an LLC structure, a limited liability corporation. You structure that way in order to avoid individual liability at the corporate level. It's, again, lawyers of the world can explain it much better than I can. But in the context of ownership of the company, you will own it what's referred to as a membership interest. So your $500,000 investment will buy you a single membership interest in a share class that entitles you to a 2.25% preferred return. And then that will also entitle you to 1% of the profits of the business at the time of exit. I shouldn't limit it to that. Annual profits as well. So after we make the preferred return payments, if there's additional free cash flow, you would get another 1% of whatever that looked like. So yes, there is direct equity ownership. That's one of the requirements of the direct EB-5 program. We're keeping it small, as I said, 8 to 10 investors. We will form that advisory committee. So you're going to be engaged and informed. You won't be obligated to participate if you choose not to, but the forum will always exist for you to take an active role in keeping up with what's going on. And we're going to be open and transparent throughout this process.
Yeah, and here's one other question. Lakshmi, you have to tell me when to stop, or we have to do the other questions. But how much will be the legal fee for the entire process? Can the whole family get green card initially?
It's spouse and children under the age of 21. Yes, it's buy one, get family members for free. And if you email us, I'll be happy to tell you what our legal fees are and give you any additional information. Because it's 114, Chandrasekhar, I know you'd love to answer those other questions, but I think what we'll do is I would refer them to our Telegram group. We'll try to have a live Telegram sometime tomorrow, so that whatever questions we couldn't answer today, we can answer that.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody, but I want to take you all, you, Lakshmi and Daniel, all the viewers. Where were you 33 years ago today? Just think about it. I'll tell you where I was. I was in the plane landing to United States of America 33 years ago on an F1 visa to VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University, straight from Bombay by Air India.
I think I was crying in Bombay. So I think that's
Yes. So that's where I was 33 years ago. I came to this country. Daniel, where were you 30 years ago?
Is this where I say I was hating 8th grade?
Okay. I thought you say you were in Duke University.
No.
He's a young guy. He's much younger than we
Look,
are.
what little hair I have left is gray, as is my beard, but that's an indication of stress, not age.
Well, I
Hey,
want to
what
thank
is that? What is that band behind you signifying? Red, blue, and green. And white too?
That's just a painting.
Oh, okay. I
Um,
thought maybe you had a combination flag of India and USA. There's no circle there. I know.
there's no orange either, I don't think.
I have a great India flag tattoo story
All
that
right.
I'll save for another time.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to hear that story. I want to thank everyone for joining today, and please don't be disheartened if we didn't get to your non-EB-5 questions. It's just been a long time, so we'll take them on Telegram tomorrow, and we'll tell you what time. I'm sure we'll share that update with you. So when I say I'm going to be on Telegram, you got to get on Telegram to ask your questions, because we had past 2 times we had like 20, 30 people. That's an hour that I'm dedicating to answer all your questions on a one-on-one basis. So Kara shared the link. I want to thank Daniel for coming in. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank my team, Kara, and all the others for working so hard. And of course, Chandrasekhar, as a moderator, you're like the moderator in chief. So thank you so much for your.
And because I forgot last time, I want to thank Kara as well. She's tremendous in helping get these set up, and a wonderful resource. Thank you, Kara.
Yes.
Shaker,
Kara
always
is,
thank you.
yeah, I'm the face, but this is all, we're the face, but it's all Kara. Thank you again. Y'all have a great
See you,
day,
Daniel.
and
Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
bye-bye.